Good morning, everyone. This is Jim Markson. I'm Deputy Director for Communications at the Department of Toxic Substances Control. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning to discuss our recent study on the levels of flame retardants in women's breast milk. I want to introduce the folks who are with me today on this call to help introduce the subject and answer your questions. They are Barbara Lee, the Director of the Department of Toxic Substances Control, Mirto Petraeus, a research scientist supervisor in our environmental chemistry lab in Berkeley, and Dr. Meredith Williams, Deputy Director for our Safer Products and Workplace program. Also available to answer your questions, we have Dr. Gina Solomon, who's Deputy Secretary for Science and Health at Cal EPA, Carl Palmer, a branch chief in our Safer Products and Workplace program, and Sam Delson, who's Deputy Director for Communications at the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. So as they speak, I'll ask them to spell their names, and if you'd like us to repeat that, we will go ahead and do so. With that, I'd like to introduce our Director Barbara Lee.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you all for participating in this call. It's really wonderful news that we are able to talk with you about today. There was a study that was conducted by our environmental chemistry laboratory that demonstrates that removal of dangerous flame retardants from furniture has actually resulted in greater health protection for pregnant women and children. The findings of the study show a 39% decline of polybrominated diphenyl ethers, which are also called PDBEs, and they're common flame retardants that are found in many household products. Their use in California was phased out under Assembly Bill 302 that was authored by former Assemblymember Wilma Chan in 2003. And since then, a dozen other states have instituted similar bans. In addition, in 2014, the governor signed SB 1019, which gives consumers the right to know whether the furniture they're buying contains flame retardants that might be harmful to their health. The study we're talking about today compares PBDE levels in breast milk before and after the phase-out under Wilma Chan's bill, and it shows that regulatory and public health interventions do work. It highlights the importance of biomonitoring as an important tool to measure how well these interventions get the job done. To assess the effectiveness of the PBDE phase-out, our scientists compared levels of PBDEs in the breast milk of 67 first-time mothers recruited at the Women's Health and Birth Center in Santa Rosa between 2009 and 2012, and it compared the levels found in their breast milk to levels from another group of 82 women that were in a previous study DTSC conducted between 2003 and 2005. These findings underscore the importance of the biomonitoring studies, and they highlight the concrete benefits of product reformulation and the promise of DTSC's Safer Consumer Products program for a healthier future for Californians. I'd like now to have Dr. Mirto Petraeus from our Environmental Chemistry Lab talk to you about the study.
Good morning. Before I go into the study, I want to give a little background about PBDEs. In the late 90s, we discovered PBDEs in California women at levels which are strikingly high. They were 40 times more than what we knew about Europe and Asia. So we looked elsewhere, and everywhere we looked, we found PBDEs, and every time was another record. So very high levels in breast milk, in blood, in adipose tissues, in wildlife, harbor seals, fish, peregrine falcons, in consumer products, electronics, furnishings, in house dust, in fire station dust, in our waste streams. So what made California unique was really its unique flammability standards, which resulted in consumer products being packed with flame retardants to meet flammability standards. And because these PBDEs are loosely bound to the product, they can easily migrate, escape out, so they end up in the indoor environment, and particularly in the dust. So we get exposed by contact with dust, touching something and hand-to-mouth contact. That's why children are particularly vulnerable. They're closer to the floor, and they put everything in their mouth. And so are cats, and I'll come to the cats later. So we found these very high levels. The concern is that these chemicals stay in our bodies for years, and they have the potential to interfere with hormone functions and affect neurodevelopment and impact learning abilities of children. So to our study now. As I said, we had measured PBDs in many different contexts. One of them was a study of breast milk that we recruited women from 2003 to 2005, and we analyzed the breast milk, and we had found very high levels. This was published some years ago. So after that, the ban and the phase-out happened. So this time we worked with the Santa Rosa Women's Health and Birth Center closely to recruit pregnant women, interview them, and collect breast milk. But also in this time, because it was a clinic, we collected blood from the mothers and also cord blood at birth. So we really had a very good collaboration with the staff of the clinic. So we analyzed everything, and the first thing we see is that babies come to this world, loaded with chemicals. So the cord blood showed very high levels of chemicals. In some cases, some chemicals were even higher than the mothers. So babies come loaded with chemicals, and then they have their breast milk, which is again loaded with chemicals. Now, the good news, and that's what we're going to talk about here, is that the breast milk that we analyzed in the second phase of our study, 2009 to 12, had 39% lower levels of PBDEs than the first study in 2003, 2005. So that's the good news. One problem is that even, first of all, every baby would be exposed to PBDs because all the breast milks had PBDs, and 30% of those babies will be exposed to a level above what the US EPA considers as an action level, a reference dose. So 30% of our babies now get exposed to unacceptable levels of PBDs. The flip side is that this number, the 30% of this study, is really lower than it was in the first study, which was 60%. So now not only are levels lower, but also the fraction of children, babies that are exposed to an acceptable level has dropped. So this is good news, and it's not the first time we report that. A couple of years ago, we reported the first drop, almost the same number, 39% or something, in the blood of pregnant women from San Francisco General Hospital. So that was good news. This is consistent with a study on wildlife from San Francisco Bay showing a drop in PBDEs in the aquatic species. And we also have a very recent study where we measure PBDEs in house cats, again, before and after, and we can see a drop in the blood of the house cats. So everything is consistent. And as Director Lee said, in our study really points to the fact that interventions work. And biomonitoring is a great tool to see how well they do work. So we're happy about this news, but again, we have to worry and think, the question is, what other chemicals are still there? So maybe we've dealt with PBDs, what other things are there, and how can we prevent from other toxic chemicals being used instead of the ones that are phased out? And I think that's where our Safer Consumer Program is leading the way on that and finding solutions. So with that, I would turn to Dr. Williams.
This is Meredith Williams, Dr. Meredith Williams. That's MEREDITH Williams. And yes, this really is an important study that demonstrates that we can make a difference with legislative and regulatory actions. The statutory action to ban PBDs had a direct result in lowering the amount of PBDs we're seeing in women's bodies and in babies. This study shows that very clearly, and it demonstrates the promise for reducing Californians' exposures to other harmful chemicals. This is the kind of good, strong evidence we need to let us know when we're successful when we take these actions. These studies do take a long time, and so it's important to continue to support this kind of work so that we can track the effectiveness of regulatory action over time and track the changes that we're trying to make. The Safer Consumer Products Program was set up to avoid a number of the problems associated with chemicals like this. And it's especially designed to ask manufacturers to consider chemical safety in the design of their products. Not only are we asking them to consider particular product chemical combinations and the possible harm from those, combinations. We're asking manufacturers to do a comprehensive analysis of any alternatives they put in place to remove one harmful chemical, because we know that sometimes one harmful chemical gets removed only to replace it with another chemical that causes similar or sometimes different problems. And we want manufacturers to think about the chemicals they're putting in their products, mostly so that the consumers don't have to. It's very difficult for consumers to understand what's in their products. They're not necessarily labeled with the chemical ingredients. And they're also not in a position to do the redesign and to consider the alternatives, but the manufacturers have the knowledge and expertise and the resources to do this kind of analysis. One interesting note on flame retardants is that a new flame retardant standard has come into effect in California under Technical Bulletin 117/2013, and that changes the way products are tested for flame retardants, at least furniture, and we do expect that to reduce the need for flame retardants in furniture and possibly in other products. But because that law doesn't, because that technical bulletin doesn't cover products that are not furniture, we do think that Californians will still be exposed to flame retardants, despite the changes in this standard.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Carl or Gina, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, this is Gina Solomon, and I have two things that I'd like to add. The first is to point out how important this is for health, because these PBDE chemicals that were monitored in this study are extraordinarily persistent. They persist in the environment, they persist in our bodies, and they are also toxic. They're associated with neurological deficits, especially in the developing brain, and they're also endocrine disruptors. So in particular, they target the thyroid gland. And in fact, the study that Dr. Petraeus mentioned that was just published, in which she and her colleagues looked at house cats. Of course, house cats are important sentinels, and they do like to lick themselves, so they get exposed to dust. They found abnormal thyroid levels in the house cats with the higher PBDE levels, which is yet another piece of evidence that these chemicals interfere with thyroid function. So seeing this decline is really important for the health of California families, and we really are anxious to see the levels continue to go down with all of the additional policy actions that are going on to reduce use of these chemicals and exposure to them. The other thing I just want to mention is that this is an important indication of how important it is to do biomonitoring. This is part of Biomonitoring California, which is an ongoing study looking at different populations around the state and their exposures to all kinds of chemicals. And it's a way to basically keep our fingers on the pulse of the California people. What's going on out there, what chemicals may be increasing, what chemicals are decreasing, are our policy activities helping? Are there certain groups or populations in the state that are most exposed? And if so, that's where we can target our actions. So these are, I think, extremely important studies to continue in order to make sure that we're actually getting on top of this problem of chemicals in children especially.
Thank you. Sam, do you have anything to add?
No, just to second Dr. Solomon's comments on the importance of biomonitoring in California, and to note that the guidance panel of the Biomonitoring California program will be meeting third here at Cal EPA further the work of that program.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up for questions now. The operator will be giving you instructions on how to do that. I also want to remind everyone that we will be having an audio podcast of this session available on DTSC's website following the call. So, operator, with that, I'd like to open it up for questions, and I'd like to remind everyone when you do get on the line to tell us who you are and who you represent. Thank you.
Our first question is from Barbara Ostrup. Please state your affiliation before stating your question.
Hi, thank you for having this call. I'm calling from Kaiser Health News. Could someone talk a little bit more about the health impacts that you've seen with PBDEs? If you could expand on that a little bit more in terms of children drinking breast milk that is contaminated, and kind of the long-term outcomes for those kids. And then a second question is, where is this being published? Is this being published in a medical journal, and how will it be made available after the press conference call? Thank you.
Dr. Solomon, can you handle the first part of that question, and then, Mirto, you could take the second?
Yes, absolutely. This is Gina Solomon again, and I'm a physician with expertise in internal medicine and occupational and environmental medicine. And the PBDEs are still under extensive study to understand really what they do in humans and at what levels. We do have a good number of animal studies that show neurologic effects, especially to the developing brain, and we see we have numerous studies showing thyroid effects. Oddly enough, actually, in cats, the thyroid, they seem to get hyperthyroidism. In other animals and humans, we see the opposite, so hypothyroidism, but clearly interactions with the thyroid. We also know that the thyroid is important for development of the human brain, and that thyroid deficiency in the mother or the infant can lead to what used to be called cretinism, but now is usually treated, but can cause IQ loss in babies and young children. So these are all signals of concern. There were also some studies suggesting an association with cancer. However, we really don't have the long-term human studies that we do with a chemical such as lead, where we really understand what the effects are at what doses in people. And so the studies that Dr. Petraeus has been doing really are focused mostly on exposure, just to get a sense of what's going on over time. There are other researchers at UC Davis and UC Berkeley, for example, that are doing longer-term studies following kids who were exposed to PBDEs and looking at effects over time. So we'll know a lot more about these chemicals, I'm sure, in a few years. But, of course, we don't want to wait that long to take action, given what we already know.
Thank you.
This is Mr. Petraeus. The study is published in the journal Atmosphere, and we'll give the link on our website.
Okay, thank you.
The next question is from Pamela Martin. Please state your affiliation before stating your question.
Good morning. I'm with the California Research Bureau, and can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I got a new phone yesterday. All right. My question is, I see that the study is on Chemosphere, and it's behind a paywall. I wondered if it could be made available to the California State Library.
We will have the link on our website, so you can download it from there.
It's coming to the website. It's not there yet. Is that correct?
We'll check on that, and we'll get back to you. If you could, do you have Ben's contact information?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Ben will set it up for you and all of you to be able to get it.
Okay, great.
There are no other questions on the phone line at this time.
Well, thank you, operator, and thanks everyone for calling in. If you have any more questions, you have our contact information on the news release, which just went out as well. With that, thank you very much and have a good afternoon.